Hey guys, Brian Schultz here with Cape Falcon Kayak, and I'm really excited right now because for the first time in 7 years, we finally have a really good float bag option for our skin-on-frame sea kayaks. Now, before I get into talking about this particular bag and what I think makes it so good, why don't we just take a moment and talk about float bags in general. Now, the reason you want to have float bags in any sea kayak is so if it floods with water, it's easier to do a rescue and a re-entry. But for this to work the way that you want it to, those float bags need to be very large and they need to not leak. And unfortunately, that excludes most of the float bags that are being manufactured today. Now, a notable exception to this was the Bidarka bags that were manufactured by Corey Friedman at skinboats.org. These were the float bags that I used for the first half of my skinboat career. They were really heavy-duty urethane-coated nylon. They had a separate air and a separate gear chamber, which let you fill them full of gear, put them in the kayak, and then inflate them with air to pin the gear to the bottom of the kayak. It was a super smart design, but unfortunately, due to the availability of the materials, Corey stopped manufacturing them about 7 years ago. Now, for a couple years, we really didn't have any good options until Track kayaks came along with their folding sea kayaks. And they made their own custom float bags that were designed to fit in their kayaks, which don't perfectly fit into the Cape Falcon kayaks, but they were close enough that I've been recommending them for quite a few years. Now, Track has a couple of float bag options. The first one is more of a budget option. It's a thin urethane-coated nylon with a roll closure at the top. And the thing that I like about this bag is it's actually pretty big. And when it comes to flotation in skin-on-frame boats, more is always better. But the thing I don't like about this particular bag is that because it's thinner urethane-coated nylon, I've had issues with the seam splitting, although that is pretty easy to repair. But more importantly, the roll closure is never going to be completely airtight because it's a single chamber bag for both your air and your gear. And so I would say this is the kind of bag you would want to get if you ended up in a situation where it wouldn't be life-threatening if you had a float bag failure. Now, moving up from there, Track also has an expedition grade bag, which is a much heavier duty fabric, and it has a dry suit zipper closure across the top of it. Now, this is still a single chamber bag, which means that if that zipper fails, you could potentially lose flotation and get your gear wet at the same time. But in reality, it seems to be a pretty durable zipper. I haven't heard of any failures on the water, and as long as you maintain it carefully and keep sand and other grit out of it, you shouldn't have any problems with failure there. Really, the only thing that I don't like about this particular bag is that it's not quite as big as their other bags, so it doesn't give me as much flotation as I want, although that's not the fault of the bag, it's just that it's designed for a kayak that's not specifically one of my kayaks. So I feel like that bag would be a really good option for someone that's building a mid-size or smaller Cape Falcon kayak, because all my kayaks come in a bunch of different sizes, and potentially if you're going to be buying a Track folding kayak and building one of my sea kayaks, so you can have a single set of bags that you can use for either one. So that's just kind of a quick summary of the float bag options that were available until very recently. Now let's get into talking about this new float bag produced by Alan McDonald at Waterlight Custom Float Bags. Now, what this float bag is a collaboration between me and Alan to design what I think is the perfect float bag to fit inside of a Cape Falcon kayak. What you're looking at here is heavy-duty urethane-coated nylon. It is a dual chamber bag, which means that it has a separate sealed air chamber and a completely separate gear chamber with a roll closure at the top. And what we did with this bag was we took the basic concept that was invented by Corey Friedman at skinboats.org and we improved upon it just by modifying and changing all of the little things that have annoyed me about different float bags over the years. So rather than just kind of stand here and flop this around in front of me, why don't we go over to the bench here and I'll just walk you through the different features of the bag, and then we'll load this thing up with gear and we'll slide it inside of this kayak frame so you can see how the whole system is designed to work together. So first thing to notice about this bag here is that it is as big as we could possibly make it and still have it slide easily in and out of most sizes of Cape Falcon kayaks. And like I said before, the reason that matters is because the bigger your bag is, the more water it's going to exclude and the easier it's going to be to do your rescues and re-entries. Now, additionally, this is made out of a heavy-duty thermoplastic polyurethane coated nylon with an extra thick coating. And the reason that's an important detail is because most of these types of fabrics don't have a thick enough coating to make a reliable seal around the edge, which can lead to failure and also air leakage. And incidentally, that's one of the #1 reasons that Corey Friedman stopped manufacturing a similar bag, because he wasn't willing to pay the additional cost for this particular material. Now, Alan has taken a different approach to that. He's just gone ahead and bought the expensive material and assumed that people would understand why the bags are a little bit more expensive because of it. Now, zooming in on the inflation tube here for a minute, Alan has managed to find a stem design and an attachment for it that is a little bit more solid than what I've seen on most float bags. Now, additionally, he's also located this off center, and the reason that matters is because if this is sitting in the middle of the bag, it will catch on the deck beams as it's sliding in and out of the kayak. Now, in addition to putting it off center, he's also done something really unique here, which is orienting it sideways instead of straight back. And the reason this matters is because if you orient this pointing backwards like you see on most float bags, the stem ends up floating between your legs in the kayak and it ends up being annoying. Whereas doing it this way allows the inflation tube to run along the side of the kayak where it's going to be out of the way and where you want it to be. Now, additionally, he's also put an extra long inflation tube on this, which is great because it allows you to slide the entire bag to the end of the kayak and then inflate it from the cockpit, even if you're sitting in the cockpit, to really lock the bag in place and pin all the gear to the bottom of the boat. Now, coming down to the end of the bag here, this is one of those places where it was really important to be able to work with Alan directly on the design, because I'll show you here in a minute that the way that I like to load these bags is to put my tent all the way at the end of this and then slide the bag to the front of the kayak. But there's a really narrow tolerance there between having this be big enough for the tent, but small enough that it fits far enough to the front of the kayak. And we really worked hard to get this the right size and then also the right shape at the end so it slid in cleanly and didn't catch on any edges up here. Now, additionally, Alan has put a little loop on the end here that you can hook a pole line into if you're somebody that likes to have pole lines in your skin-on frame kayak. Other companies use a grommet. I don't think there's an advantage or a disadvantage either way. This is just the way that he's doing it on this particular bag. So that's pretty much the basic design here. Why don't we go ahead and load this thing up with gear and put it in the kayak, and I'll show you how it looks in real life. Okay, so what I've got here is just kind of the standard items that I usually put in the bow bag before I load it into the kayak. Now, keep in mind that this is also a float bag, so you don't have to have gear in here. You can just inflate it with air and it's still gonna do the same job. So I'm gonna start out here with my tent. This just happens to be the MSR Hubba Hubba. I'm gonna slide this into the end. And you can really see what I was talking about, how that goes all the way to the end here, but there's not any extra space. Next thing I'm going to put in is my sleeping pad, which is the Xped SynMat 7. And I really think that this is one of the best camping mats ever designed. I'm going to put that in. And next to that, I'm going to put my sleeping bag. This is just a 20-degree down sleeping bag. I think it's a Sierra Designs. And then finally here, I've usually got one more bag with some clothing. I usually put my Kindle in here, just anything I'm gonna need around camp. And notice that this is in its own separate dry bag, the same way that my sleeping bag was. And this is just kind of a basic principle of sea kayak camping. Anything that you need to stay 100% dry has to be double bagged. So I've got the dry bag and it's going inside of a dry bag here. And now we're sure that we're not going to have a wet sleeping bag or wet clothes in camp. So once you've got all this stuff in place, now you can just go ahead and roll this up here. And once you've got at least 4 rolls on this, you can go ahead and clip it together at the end here. And now we can take this whole package and bring it over to the kayak. So reason I'm doing this with a kayak frame here as opposed to a finished kayak is so you can really see how this slides in and out of the boat. And this is why it's so important to either have your boat designed around your bags or your bags designed to fit inside of your boat, because otherwise camping out of a skin-on frame kayak can get really frustrating. And so I'm gonna go ahead and take this guy, and if this was a finished kayak, I would start by pulling my foot braces back so they're not gonna get in the way. I'm gonna take the bag And I'm just going to push that all the way forward. And then finally, I'll use my foot braces to lock it in place so it's not going to move. And then very last thing I'll do is take the inflation stem and I'll inflate the rest of the bag to get as much air in as possible and to really lock this bag in place. So that's how the bag fits in the front of the kayak here. Now, what about what happens here in the back? Now, in the back of the kayak, at least in one of my kayaks, you've got a couple different choices. The first one is that you can build it with a flat back deck like this, which is my preferred option because it's quicker and it's easier, and I like the paddling characteristics of this arrangement. But what that means is that you're gonna have to push the bag in first, and then you're gonna have to load the bag through the cockpit. And the reason that's okay is because unlike the bow bag, which is sitting way up in front of your feet, this is right at the back of the cockpit, which means that it's really easy to get any of the things that you need to get into it. Now, as long as I'm back here, I should mention that I usually put my heavier stuff in the rear float bags. So food, fuel, cooking gear, all that stuff usually goes back here. Now, if you don't want to do that, there is another option. For any of my modern sea kayaks, I have a modification available where you can hump this up a little bit and it raises the back of your coaming, but it does give you enough space that you can load this with gear and push it into the back the same way as we push the bag into the front. So up to you and your particular kayak build, what direction you want to go with that. Now, I guess I should just finish up here by saying that if you're not building one of my sea kayaks, you're building some other skin-on-frame kayak, it doesn't mean that you can't use these particular float bags, because the cool thing about Alan's business and the reason that it's called customfloatbags.com is because these are custom float bags. So if you don't want to go with one of his standard designs, you can take some measurements and he can build you a set of these bags to fit into your kayak specifically. Now, also, for people who are building lower volume Greenland kayaks that don't have enough room for camping gear but do need flotation, you can also just order a set of float bags from him, and those are going to be significantly less expensive than going with the combo flotation and gear bags that I showed you here today. Now, just a quick word on price here. While you're checking these out on Alan's site, you might notice that this is one of the more expensive float bag options right now, but hopefully this video has helped you to understand why that is and the quality and the time that went into designing these and producing these. I don't personally get any kind of a kickback or anything from Alan for doing this. I just wanted to support somebody who took the time to do something that we have sorely needed for a long time in the skin-on-frame community. So it's also worth keeping in mind that any time that you actually need a float bag is usually a time that you're in a life-threatening situation. And those are the times that quality really pays for itself. So final thing I want to mention here is that float bags are just one part of your overall sea kayak safety strategy. And so if you want to learn more about flotation and how it relates to rescue and other parts of your safety kit, including a sea sock, make sure you go to my website and check out my free skin-on-frame kayak prep course. Look for a video called Float Bags and Sea Socks, and that gives you a much deeper dive into how all the parts of your safety system work together, because what you don't want to do is rely on a single component while neglecting other parts of your safety strategy, because that's how things that should make you more safe end up making you less safe on the water. Now, another thing you might want to check out while you're there is my lightweight skin-on-frame camping course, because whether you're camping out of a pack canoe or whether you're camping out of a kayak, there's a lot of knowledge that can help you to make the process really efficient while remaining really comfortable on the water and not getting too crazy into the ultralight thing. So if you want to check that out, you can find that in that same location. That class actually costs money. It's a $12 course. Some of the videos are a little bit dated now, but I think the overall knowledge in there is still worth the 12 bucks you pay for it. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. You can also find me on my website, capefalconkayaks.com, where I've got a bunch more skin-on-frame boat building courses and plans and various skin-on-frame resources. You can find me on Instagram at CapeFalconBuilds, where I post a daily build vlog of everything I'm doing here in the shop, including time-lapse videos. All right, that's it. Take care, be safe on the water, and have fun building your skin boat.